Souls 1 feels like the Dark Souls of Dark Souls games, if that makes sense. It's hard in nigh every aspect. Sometimes the word fair doesn't even feel applicable, but it works somehow. There isn't a single aspect I can say was flat out done bad with little redeeming qualities. For everything I disliked about it, there was another part I did like. It just has this undeniable charm. Like, not all the pieces are perfectly in place, but it's close enough that they still fit. As I said at the end of my DS3 video, 2 shifted into the adventure aspect and 3 focused on combat. But 1 is this weird middle ground between both games. It does neither of what those games did as well as they did, but it's in this sweet in-between of combat and RPG mechanics. And I assume that's why people love this game so much and still cling on to it even after having 2 other games to play with. It does what it did so interestingly that it holds up pretty well on its own, even now. I'd still recommend people go back and give it a try, and I wouldn't be surprised if those people felt the same way as me, or just fell in love with it. Which is really interesting to say about a more than decade-old game with multiple derivatives, as I feel not many originals have the same sort of lasting power. The love and critical acclaim Dark Souls 1 gets feels well-deserved.
The things you just heard are some takes from people who really enjoy this game, and some little things I suppose I can understand, but unfortunately Dark Souls 1 is an objectively flawed and buggy mess, held together by duct tape, and I'm going to give a full breakdown of this game and why it doesn't work on a fundamental level. This isn't about how people feel about the game, this is about the truth of the situation and how this product was delivered. Starting with the enemies, if something as simple as the general enemies that litter this world can hardly function on their own. They actually have so many issues I have to go problem by problem, as they're just such a flawed and buggy mess here. But I suppose we can start with their general AI. It really feels like they were coded by a preschooler. Even when they quote-unquote work, they can barely do anything, always opting to run up to you in a straight line and just swing without any forethought. Meaning that you can usually just wait for them to get close and swing. Depending on your weapon, this simple approach will be enough to end most encounters immediately, and makes you really wonder why they never thought to make them more than lemmings charging into a fight they know they can't win. Look at this footage of me in Blighttown simply waiting for the fishmen to walk into my loving arms of death as they all go single file down a ladder they know I'm standing at the bottom of. It's as if the pathfinding here was made by chaotic toddlers. This simple approach of just slapping code against the wall like loose spaghetti strands led to a cavalcade of other little funky issues. Like how a lot of times the enemy's AI will simply break and they have no idea what to do. I have many examples of the enemy simply brain farting and not knowing how to reach me, let alone attack me. It's as if they're struggling to think about if they want to go back home and have a nice piping hot breakfast burrito or engage with me. Meanwhile, I'm just standing there awkwardly waiting to see what this socially anxious idiot is trying to do so I can go past. It's baffling that a bunch of grown men looked at this product and thought this was good and deserved their seal of approval. This completely botched AI leads to another system seeming like the strongest thing in history: backstabbing. Whenever you get behind someone in the Souls series, you can land a backstab for huge damage, but due to how stupid the artificial intelligence is here, most times they'll just give you their back for free. And since the lazy devs couldn't think of any failsafes, you can just chain backstab most of the enemies due to the fact they have no immunity for a few seconds and can't turn around after the first backstab lands and they're getting up. Surely I should be finished right. Surely the simple pathfinding and mere code of the enemies would be enough. Sit back down because we have more to talk about on this front. The code doesn't work, but what about the placement, right? Surely that's fine. No, absolutely not. At times it feels like I'm playing horde mode for how many random enemies will just appear and try to get a piece of me. Duke's Archives is a prime example. You can see me casually trying to go through the area and it almost looks like Dynasty Warriors footage with how I'm just getting absolutely swarmed left and right, as if the developers were just copy and pasting enemies. And don't think the other areas are any better. It's clear that this A-team, as it were, don't really know how to do anything. Demon Ruins is one of the worst areas for the amount of enemy spam that's just all over the place, let alone those enemies are just reused variants of the first and second boss. Who gave this the okay, and why were they so unwell that they actually decided to go through with this? Stop spamming me. It's like no matter where you go, there will be some contrived nonsense just waiting around the corner to get you, because the devs didn't know how to make real difficulty. And sometimes it's not even the spam that'll get you. Some of the enemy placements make absolutely no sense. And Orlando is by far and away the biggest example of this issue. Why would these painted guardians be on the top of the building just waiting for someone random to walk through the window you step in through? This becomes extremely apparent when you think they were smart enough to get up here, but literally had no plan if they fell, like a safety net or something similar. Off of them we have the archers outside who are just gripping the loose scaffolding with their toenails, hoping they don't fall off the tiny balcony they stand on while firing great bows. Or maybe we can talk about the Titanite demon they have casually closed behind a normal sized door and, oh, I don't know, not somewhere more sensible like the basement or something. Across the board, the enemy placements here are just an issue. But now you think, surely I'm done now, right? Do you know what game we're talking about? Of course I'm not done. The damage output on some of these enemies is downright ludicrous. I'm wearing the Havel set alongside an upgraded Boar's Head. Meanwhile, these little crystal guys can immediately hit me for near half health anyway. I might as well be naked and flop around like a fish if they're going to be hitting me for this much while wearing one of the strongest sets in the game. They for some reason managed to hit me harder than most of the bosses in this game, and that's how I feel you should really know they were just scaling numbers up and down without any real consideration. So what you're left with here is a bunch of idiots walking around like toddlers with bazookas, able to simply atomize you on the rare occasion they can land a hit. That's if they don't end up rolling and letting you backstab them for free. However, I suppose we should talk about the next thing. The bosses. The thing that everyone loves this game for. They are fundamentally awful and some of the worst I've ever fought. In gaming, not just in this series. On average, they range from super easy to mediocrity within 2 seconds. It's astounding how many of them you can just walk around and smack while they can barely turn to get you. A clear example of the pastrami code striking again. If everything worked as intended, this would be the entirety of this section. Unfortunately, in this buggy mess, there's always a hook in these kinds of things. The hitboxes here are some of the worst I've ever seen. It feels like every other encounter I'm being hit with some foolishness that flat out shouldn't have hit me because A, I'm physically nowhere near it, or B, the hitbox jets out before the actual attack. It's things like this that make me wonder what the testing phase was like, and if there were more bugs like, oh, I don't know, bosses grappling you with their collision. Oh wait, that can happen here too. Here's an example of the chaos which Quailag hitbox shoving me into her fire puddles that shouldn't even reach me and getting a free kill from it. It's embarrassing to watch, but even worse to play. But notice I said most range from mediocre to easy. The outliers are by far and away some of the worst fights in the series, so I find it funny when some try to call out other entries in the series for having bad bosses when this one has Bed of Chaos. I feel you're setting yourself up for failure and throwing rocks from a glass house. This boss scenario was so bad, it's the only time we've heard the developers apologize for how something was made. Who else do I even need to bring up? The joke of a quote-unquote boss, that ceaseless discharge, or the Taurus demon whose weakness is going up a ladder 3 times. But what happens if you die against these sloppily produced bosses? Well, you have to go through a sloppily produced run back. Time wasters where you run for a minute, or in some cases minutes, just to get back to the boss you were on. So not only do you have to deal with some glitch, buggy, or just awful bosses, but if you die to them, you'll have to do some super silly run backs just to waste time. Like Quailag's stupid poisonous swamp or Bed of Chaos is everything, in all honesty. So the bosses and enemies, which make up 70% of the game, are bad. What's left? The areas here feel like they were intentionally designed to waste your time. For the first half in an ideal playthrough where you know exactly where to go, this isn't time consuming. However, in the 99.9% scenario that on the first playthrough you don't perfectly know the map, you'll be walking around for hours trying to figure out where the hell you're even trying to go. It leads to so much downtime of you just sauntering around like a ghoul, stomping through areas you've already been through. It's as if the devs assumed everyone was them and would have perfect pinpoint accuracy of where to go at all times. Then you reach the second half after getting the Lord Vessel, and it feels like they partially just gave up on wandering around like a rodent for cheese, as they give you the option to fast travel. Their own idea of traversing this world with your own wits while unlocking shortcuts, they couldn't even fully believe in, because it's clear they had no idea what they were doing. Ignoring that part of it, some of these areas are just designed like an in-joke or something. Blighttown is just a slug through slop, where it goes from annoying enemy spam to traversing a poisonous swamp with no way to avoid the poison other than constantly using anti-poison items, which it's very possible you won't have a ton of. Duke's Archives, aside from the ganky enemy design we talked about earlier, the end half of it, which is the part you have to do for your boss run back by the way, has slippery collision on these crystals, then invisible flooring you have to hope you follow right because otherwise it's an instant death. The Great Hollow and the DLC feel like jokes because there's no way sane people would know how to reach them. And I could go on, but let's just stop there, on this point. This world coherently makes no sense from any fantasy perspective. Where are all the normal citizens in this huge, sprawling world? We run across an entire kingdom over the course of our adventure, and we only discover a handful of people that aren't crazy hollows. In what world am I supposed to believe there's only 7 or so sane guys left, and everyone else is crazy and or a monster? This is ridiculous. Then they decided to try and be edgy and make half of these NPCs die at the end of their quests. Do you not know how to make a good story without killing the characters? To go back to the areas again, because of course I'm not done with them, the general way that they're set up and positioned makes no sense. Why would Firelink have an elevator go up to the place where the gargoyles are at? How is Firelink even considered safe when if you walk to the cemetery that's literally right next to it, there are literal sentient skeletons that attack anyone on sight, and nobody seems to be worried about them? The world feels gamey, if that makes sense. The way that these locations loop in and out of each other makes no practical sense if you were to live in this world. Then some don't make any sense at all in general, honestly. Like how if you go down from Blighttown into the Great Hollow, you then reach Ash Lake, to which there you can see the sky? You mean the sky that should be nasty, goopy swamp water? Aside from navigating these god-awful areas, we have to talk about the level layout. It goes from extremely annoying tight spaces to fight in to semi-wide areas where they just spam enemies. It just feels like sometimes they had no idea what they wanted to do, or imagine these areas without any enemies at all initially. So many times you'll be trying to swing at someone, especially if you have a heavy weapon, and you'll just ping off the wall. It's infuriating, honestly. Let's talk about fog walls and using area-related items like chests and levers. My favorite part about these is for some random reason, you receive invincibility when doing these actions. What does this mean? It means that you can disregard most of the game and just straight beeline for these any chance possible. And unlike Ds3, this game will randomly sprinkle tons of them, so sometimes you could put yourself in a downright awful scenario where you should die, and just abuse iframes to get out of them. I feel I don't need to tell you this, but when devs make a mechanic that exists to help people ignore other mechanics entirely, it's an objectively badly designed system. The only way you could argue against that is if you don't really like playing huge chunks of the game in the first place, which is a separate problem, and one that most likely falls on you. But on to the healing, because I always found that a fun topic of discussion. In Ds3 you can only really heal with Estus, and once if you had died previously, Embers. There were some other very limited healing items, but since that was an objectively good game, they were heavily limited so you couldn't really fall back on them. Ds1 fools you into thinking it might be the same, with Estus being the main healing item, but then you discover Humanities, an easily farmable resource that, while has a slower using speed, will fully recover your entire health bar when used. You can hold 99 Humanities by themselves, ignoring the twin Humanities entirely, meaning that once you figure this out, as long as you can survive, you can fully recover whenever you want to with pretty much no consequence. It's objectively cartoonish to make a resource you can hold 99 of at a time heal you to full the moment you use it. Ds3 had the genius idea of making it a one and done kind of thing, but this buggy, broken mess didn't even have the foresight to think of that. Quite literally, no other game in their catalog has an item that guaranteed heals you to full on use the moment the animation's done that you can hold 99 of. But now for the lovely, lovely controls. They feel not good. When you're walking around the general areas, it's fine, but the moment you hit the lock-on button, you've doomed yourself to a significantly worse gameplay experience. You see, the moment you hit that button, your character will enter this clunky feeling strafe mode, where your main options are either going side to side or forwards. It is disgusting. and an issue. Again, no other game in the trilogy has. I tossed and turned for one possible reason that you would want it to be like this, but I can't find one. It is objectively inferior to Ds2 and 3, but not just for that reason. Once you lock on, you can only roll in 4 directions. Why anyone in the team thought this was a good idea completely escapes me. It makes it so you might as well not use the thing, as the free locked off movement is significantly, I repeat, significantly better. Another fun thing about the controls is weapons like axes having follow through. If you fail to hit a target, your character will get awkwardly stunned for a moment. It is ludicrous to make a game where every movement's supposed to count, and the chosen undead here can cost you multiple moments because something might have moved and made him awkwardly stagger. However, I'm not done yet. Ladders. This game has some absurdly long ladders, and normally that wouldn't really be an issue. However, this game doesn't have anywhere for you to quickly go up them, so you'll be sitting there slowly squirming up these sometimes minute-long climbs, and it's such a baffling choice I don't know how they reached it. But don't worry, you can go down ladders fast. The fun part is this isn't told to you anywhere in the game. If you're still on a ladder and hold circle or your circle equivalent, you'll slide down it, which means the A-team here knew that you wouldn't want to waste time on these, but then couldn't think of a way to make you go up ladders faster. Quality of life in general, disregarding that, is an abysmal mess here. If you'd like to respec, you can't. You heard it right. The A-team made an RPG without the ability to respec, meaning it's extremely likely your first playthrough will lead to you being this jacked up combination of stats, as you wouldn't have known what any of these things really mean yet. In an objectively better game like Dark Souls 3, boss souls can be traded at Firelink with an NPC right after you beat the cursed rotted Greatwood. It's a simple but efficient system. In this game, it's very possible you won't even know what boss souls do or how to use them because of how stupidly confangled it is to make use of them. You'll more than likely use them to increase your general soul count, with no idea you've just forced yourself to miss a weapon you can't get back on this playthrough. Tail cutting is never, and I mean never, explained to the player. Even when they design a cool system in theory, they get fearful people might discover it. So the only way you'll stumble into this fact is if you chop one off by accident. It's like they think they're going to get in trouble for designing something in their own game. Overall, this game is an objectively buggy, flawed, broken mess. This isn't about your feelings or if you want to like it to be different. It's simply the truth of the matter that this game does not really work. Let's stop letting our biases or nostalgia get in the way of that, and admit that this game has very little good working content to begin with. It's impossible to make any defense of this game without randomly trying to drag the others down, because I feel even people who like this thing, this creature of a product, no, they can't say anything without belittling the other game's works, and it leads to them making themselves sound silly in the process. But this has been a long video, and I'm sick of talking about this disappointing slop. As always, if you agree with me, leave a comment. If you don't, I'd rather not hear from you. I'm not going to respond to you or any counterpoints to this video.